So today we're going to talk about shoulder blades and shoulder blade positioning. So here we have two shoulder blades. They're both right shoulder blades. So this is the view from the front. So like if you're looking at me from here, that is what it would look like here. And then we have a posterior view of the shoulder blade. So from the back side, this is what it would look like running across here. So these are both right shoulder blades. And some interesting things about these, all these little divots in here, they are places for muscles to attach. So muscles are going to run across this way, and they help hold the humerus, this bone here, in towards the shoulder blade, help anchor it into this socket here. So you can see that this bone, it doesn't go in very deep into that socket on either the front or the back side. It's pretty shallow there, which is great for mobility and having the freedom to go overhead and move in every other direction. But it's not so great for stability, especially if we have too much tension in any one direction. And so I put a few of the shoulder blade positions on here for us to kind of get an idea of directions of movement for the shoulder blades, and some ideas to think about is like if you have one direction pulling too much, like are you up too high, or are you squeezing too much in the back. We really want to suspend the shoulder blade right in the middle between all 6 of these different directions. We want to be able to kind of hold the shoulder blade in a nice position where it's balanced evenly. So in the chat I put the 6 directions of movement, and then I drew a few of them, and then I'll talk about the different ways that they work together. So the first one we have here is going to be our elevation. So the shoulders are up high, the muscles in the top of the shoulder, they help lift the shoulders up. It's a good thing to be able to do that. We just don't want to get stuck in that position. So we have that one, that's the first one. And then the second one we have is going to be actually depression. It's going to be the opposite of elevation. So it's not depressed like you're sad, it's depressed like it's being pulled down. So depression is somewhat like this. It's pulling down, and that is the opposite of pulling up. And there's different muscles that work that help do that. And then the next one we have after that is going to be adduction or retraction, where the shoulder blades are pulled together. You could be like squeezed in there. That would be this one on the right. And then we have protraction, which is going to be the spreading of the shoulder blades. The shoulder blades are going around the rib cage. They are spreading away from each other, away from the midline. And then after we have those two, we're going to go into upward rotation. And this happens when the arms go overhead. As you see this diagram here, the arms are up overhead. And we need the shoulder blade to rotate and come out. For every degree we go up overhead, we need to get that shoulder blade to rotate 2 degrees to accommodate that, and to make sure that the humerus, this bone here, right there, is in a nice stable position. And when we lose some of that, we run into issues, and we'll get into some of that in a bit. But we definitely want to make sure that we have a nice rhythm there, if you will, and a nice smooth flow. When we raise the arm up overhead, the shoulder blade slides along with that to accommodate that. And then the opposite of that is going to be downward rotation. So I drew this kind of to be like a mix of downward rotation and depression. A lot of times they will be accompanied with each other, not necessarily have to be, but a lot of times they do accompany each other. And a lot of times with downward rotation, it's just going to be like the return to like a normal anatomical position, just back to like a normal state. So what we have with that, sometimes people get a little bit too much and they get stuck. And people get stuck in all of these positions. Like every one of these positions, people can pretty much have their shoulder blades just get a little bit more favored to pull in that direction. And just like everything else that we've talked about the past few weeks with having something that is stuck or pulling too much in one direction, we want to go ahead and balance it out. We want to work on some of the soft tissue things, we want to work on some of the stretches, and then we most certainly want to go ahead and strengthen the areas that are not pulling as much. That is a big part of it. And then we want to integrate that back into normal movement pattern or regular movement pattern, and try to get that back to neutral, if you will, or back to a place where things are in a good rhythm or they're flowing well together. And so we'll start off with elevation. This is a super common one, but people are just a little bit more tight up here. Shoulder blades are a little bit raised up on the rib cage, and these muscles up top, they're a lot of times really tight. And then the muscles down in like this area here below, they're not as engaged, so they're not holding tension. And a lot of times we'll get like something like this where you might get a little bit more of this anterior tilt, where your shoulders are like this guy down here, where his shoulders are more forward. He's rounding through his spine a little bit more than optimal. So we want to go ahead and just address the elevated shoulder first. One thing I like to do is use soft tissue like massage to help release some of the soft tissue. And let me grab my tennis ball. You can use a tennis ball or a massage ball. It's really good to help loosen some of this stuff up. And then I like to use maybe a towel, or you could use a sheet. This is something you could do at home that's real easy. You could also use a Theracane. Works really well for this. What we could do is on the affected shoulder, or whatever shoulder we're trying to work on, we can take a towel, fold it up to where it's a nice 5-inch width, and then you take this ball, put it in on top of the shoulder here, kind of massage in there, see if you find something, and then you can take the towel and pull down on this and put in a decent amount of pressure, whatever you can handle there, really pulling down. And then once that starts to subside, it starts to relax a little bit, we can work a little bit of range of motion, kind of stretching in that area, and get that to loosen up some. That'll help the shoulder relax just a little bit down. Another area we want to hit when that is up like that is going to be the levator. So it's going to be not on the top like we just were. It's going to be a little bit more down on the inside of the shoulder blade. And what we're going to do is we're going to put that ball right into that spot. So I'm going to shift that back to here. And then I'm going to go ahead and put some more pressure on that. So you can see it's a little bit further back. Let this arm on this side just hang free. Let that relax as best you can. And then we're going to go ahead and look up towards the same side, and then look down and away, going nose to the opposite armpit. And just get through some range of motion here. Maybe go 8 to 10 per side on both of these range of motion exercises. It's going to help us do some of that soft tissue release, get that tension to kind of subside a bit. And then after we go through that, might want to just hit through side part of the shoulder. You could take that ball, you could just roll with your hand, or you could always take that and just kind of stick that up against the wall and shove that into the wall and kind of just scoot through. A lot of times we're going to find that on the side of the arm, it's going to be like from like the thumb to the pinky. Find that spot right there. It's going to run down in the middle of the arm. You find a tender spot in there, work it out. It could be a little bit above it too, and just dig into that area with the ball, and just working with as much pressure into the wall as you can tolerate. If it's really tough, maybe use just your hand and work it to get that to relax. Once you get those areas to relax a little bit, we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of thoracic extension on the foam roller if you're really anteriorly rotated. If you're more up this way, you might not need it as much, but if you have a little bit of this going on where you're rounded, I think it's really helpful to go ahead and just get some extension on the foam roller. We put that down behind there, and then starting at the ribs, we're going to go ahead and just tip. So right at the bottom of the ribs, we'll start tipping here, and then we can slide down a little bit, get a couple more tips through there. And I'm trying to squeeze in the middle of the back to help me pull into that posterior tip. So I'm tipping away from that rounded position. I'm trying to tip this direction over the foam roller, right where I'm pressing down. And then once I go through that, I want to go ahead and get these muscles that are not firing as much to activate. So a couple that I like to do, it's going to be internal and external rotation for this one. And then once I go through internal and external rotation, I'm going to do a couple other things before I integrate that in the normal movement pattern. So going about waist high is good. You can certainly do different angles for internal and external rotation. But first, starting out, this is the easiest way I found to learn the maneuver. And then going with different angles is great. Finding an angle that's more specific to like movements that you do is really, really helpful. But when you're first just trying to learn how to squeeze these muscles, keeping the arm pretty close to the body is typically the easiest. And we're going to go external rotation here. I like to think about trying to keep the elbow pinned up against the side. If you have a hard time keeping the elbow pinned, what you can do is you can roll that towel up, or you can stick the ball under there, and then just working through that external rotation, trying to keep the elbow pinned close to the body there. And then once you go through about 12 to 15, we'll go ahead and switch to the other side, or switch to the other direction. I'm going to switch to the other side for demonstration purposes, but we would do this on both arms. And then we would go internal rotation, working through this squeeze across the body, twisting, just from like the shoulder to the elbow, we're rotating there. And we're going to try to keep that nice and steady all the way through. Elbow comes off of the body towards the end here, that's okay. It kind of needs to do that. But we want to keep it pinned up against the body as we go into external rotation. Keep it nice and snug. And then what we're going to feel when we're going through internal rotation, we're going to feel this musculature that wraps in here. So like there's these muscles that come from here and they wrap out here. We're going to end up feeling that working real deep, almost like in the armpit, real deep in the shoulder blade. And then when we're going external rotation, we're pulling out, we're going to feel the muscles out here. They're going to be on like the outer layer of the shoulder blade. So you think about like a shoulder blade has musculature on both the front inside portion and on the outside portion, where you can kind of feel it here, right? This side here, you can feel that musculature. It's really hard to palpate or feel those muscles on the inside of the shoulder blade, but we want to be able to like use them when we're working through here. So it's really important that we go through these exercises to help us set some tension in the shoulder blade itself. And then we're going to go ahead into some A's, and then we're going to do some Y's. So A's are going to help us squeeze in the middle of the back, these muscles right below the shoulder blade and up into the middle of the shoulder blade here. And what we can do is, laying on our belly, we're going to go ahead and just lift the arms straight off the ground, squeezing in the back, and then lowering back down. And we can go for about 12 to 15 here, really trying to get a good sensation in the middle of the back. Some people like to roll a towel up and kind of put their forehead on the towel. That is totally a good way to approach it. And then I like to do some Y's here too. So Y's are going to help us with a little bit of that posterior tip. So we're going to think about lifting up from the middle of the back again, kind of tipping the shoulder blades down, kind of pulling the opposite direction of that forward lean. And we're going to get a really good squeeze right here in the middle of the back as we lift up. And that's going to help us kind of engage those muscles that aren't really firing when we're here. Right now we got them engaged, we're firing, we're a little bit more open. I like to go ahead and just take that right into a row, and then we'll get everything to work together here. So as we're in this position, we already got that engaged. We're going to work on holding the core nice and steady, and then we'll work through just a regular row. Kind of integrate those muscles that we were just using with this pattern. A lot of times what happens if you are elevated, when you go into the row, you're going to kind of shrug your way through. Your shoulder is going to kind of shift forward, and that is going to put a lot of stress on the front of the shoulder there. And that's really, long term, it's really tough on the shoulder. It creates a lot of like impingement. It creates a little friction in there. It could cause like a little bit of like snag on your rotator cuff. So long term, like it's really not healthy for the shoulder. And the same thing when we go for the press. We're going to make sure that we're engaging through the middle of the back, and then we're going to go ahead and work through a press, trying to stay nice and tall. I like to try to feel those muscles deep in the shoulder blade, armpit area as we're pressing forward here, keeping that shoulder blade pulled down. And we'll work through about 12 to 15 and try to integrate those muscles that we just activated into that full movement pattern. And then we have the next one we'll go through is depression. The scapular depression is where the shoulders are pulled down, and we'll think about some of the stuff that's tight here. And a lot of people that are into bodybuilding or lifting really heavy can run into this scenario. So like what happens is the muscles that pull the shoulder blades in together, they are tight, they're really strong. And then the muscles that pull the shoulder blades down, so you can think like a lat pull, when you're pulling your shoulders down into that position, these muscles in here and through here, they end up getting really tight and they pull the shoulder blades into that position. And we think about like a lot of times that's going to be accompanied with a little bit of that like downward rotation. So the shoulder blades are like a little bit pinned together there. And some of the things I like to think about for getting that to relax is going to be getting the lats to kind of cool off a bit, and then also we're going to think about like getting that levator, this top muscle again, to relax. So what I like to do is go through the foam roller. We're going to roll the same way with the thoracic spine. We'll get those rhomboids, the muscles right in between the shoulder blades, to relax. So we'll go ahead and roll through there. And I like to think about here, trying to bring the elbows together. So it's already going to start to spread those shoulder blades, trying to squeeze the elbows together as we roll through that area. Be able to access those muscles a little bit better when we do that. We'll roll through, see if we find some tender spots. We'll work through it. And then once we get that to relax, we're going to go into the lats. So this is going to be from like the armpit down to like the top or bottom third of your rib cage. We'll just go ahead and cruise through that. You can use this top leg here to help you navigate across that. You can kind of pick your body up a little bit and slide down a little bit more. And then wherever you find the most tender spot, you're going to go ahead and hang out. I found a little one here. And then once it starts to subside, I'm just going to work through some range of motion. Driving that thumb back here. Trying to get some good range of motion. Getting those lats to kind of just loosen up a tiny bit. Give us a little bit of freedom. And then once I got that to relax, we're going to go ahead and we'll address levator scap again. So that's going to be back to the towel drill, where you can throw this on and over, and then just tuck that into like the levator, so it's right at the top inside portion. And then we're going to go ahead and get that to relax. Do the same drill here, working through that range of motion, get that to ease up. Let's see what you say here. My right shoulder meddles with everything. Lurches forward when I do preacher curls, tries to take over when I do bend over rows or chin-ups. So in like a sense of like pulling this direction then, Paul, kind of shrugging and pulling forward. Let's see. So when that happens, like if you're doing a curl and you're here, say you're working and then it wants to creep up as you're curling, what I would think there is going to have a lot to do with being able to pull this down from below as you curl. So we want to make sure that we're engaged through serratus, and we're gonna get right into that now. So after you go through and get that to relax, like your lat needs to relax probably in that case, because the lat actually attaches on the front of the shoulder. So like if the lat is overactive, it's going to pull the shoulder forward and maybe even a little bit up. So we want to make sure that the lat gets relaxed, levator scap gets relaxed to get that to ease up with the foam rolling we just went through. And then your rhomboids probably need to relax and get more out of like the middle of the back in that case. For like specifically for here, if you're going for that curl and things are coming up, I'm probably not using this tissue as well underneath the shoulder blade and below and in the ribs. That's two places that I would consider for that specific position. And for the curl, doing your chin-ups as well, it's similar type of activity in reality of like how you're going to be pulling through with the shoulder. So once you get through that soft tissue stuff, get it to relax, you're going to want to go ahead and do some stuff to help you engage these things. Internal rotation is going to be first. I would think about going ahead and getting this, it's called the subscapularis. That's your shoulder blade muscle that's real deep under the armpit. Go ahead and get that engaged from here. So you're a little bit more advanced, you might be able to handle it from here and working through the rib area. Make sure that is holding down as you're working through your internal rotation. And then after you go through that, we'll do some like wall slides where a foam roller reaches on the wall, serratus reach, they have different names for it. But that wall slide is going to be really helpful. You go ahead and take the roller, put it on the wall, thumbs are going to be facing away. I like to start with the wrist right at eye level. I'll try to go off of this here. So I'm going to brace to the core, nice and tall, and then I'm just going to reach up, and then I'm going to work through my ribs, pressing into the roller as I go through this range of motion. So like as I'm going up through here, I want to squeeze in this rib area. Get that shoulder blade to slide up, right? Because we think about when the shoulder is a little bit depressed and it's pulled in, it's not going to be working as much through there. And once you get through that, you got your internal rotator, that subscapularis, that muscle that is on the inside of the shoulder blade. You got your serratus firing. I would go ahead and integrate that in with like an overhead shrug, right? We would try to work through like maybe go from tall kneeling position, get your core engaged. We'll take some weights here, tucked at the core. We're going to go overhead, get that press, and then we're just going to try to shrug up a little bit. Squeeze in the rib area to help us shrug there. We get a little bit of upper traps working, and that's going to help us with that upward rotation. It's going to help us with getting our upper trap to fire a little bit more. So like doing shrugs, it's not going to help bring the shoulders up as much because we're not getting the upward rotation. We're just getting literal like elevation with that. And so we want to get that upward rotation going on that side. And I know you, so I know like the slope of your shoulders. You probably have a little bit of that depression going on. So the thinking about trying to get that slide, getting that opened up is really going to help. And then doing like carries when you're doing them by your side, it's gonna pull you back down into depression. So what I like to do is I'm gonna use a lightweight for this, but like I like to do a carry from here to help support that. So you can still carry some weight and an external load, but like we're gonna do it from here. So that's gonna be working that same direction, forcing that into that upward rotation, making that serratus work with the core, and then go for your walks from there, as opposed to walking from here. Because when you're walking with heavy load here, it's pulling that shoulder down. It's pulling you into that position. And not that it's a bad thing to do carries, but like if you're noticing that's what's happening, then we wanna adjust that and work on, well, how are we gonna hold that, and in ways we can load that up and strengthen it and get that upward rotation, get us out of some of that like real big slope there, and get a little bit more neutral. So we don't want to be up here, but we also don't want to be like way down too, where like things are pulling us the opposite direction. We want to find that happy medium, and it's a little bit of a process, but the more you mess around with it and you're learning where you want it, then you can kind of strive for like, I want that neutral position for my shoulder blades. Let's see, we'll go into the retracted position. So that's going to be like if you're pinching a lot, you might notice people with like, it looks like there's like a valley in between their shoulder blades. There's a big gap there. A lot of times we're going to end up with like overactive rhomboids, the muscles right between the shoulder blades there. And we're also going to have it's like a pinching looking sensation going on. So I like to go through cat-cow to try to emphasize the cat position and get this kind of opened up a little bit. So going through cat-cow, spread, emphasize this squeeze in the ribs, get those shoulder blades to spread here, working through the core. And then you can pull back down to this position, try to find a nice neutral spot here where you can get your shoulder blades in the middle, and then just working through and get that rolling first. A lot of times when we're pinching there, we're a little bit like tipped into like a posterior tip. It's not as common to have like a full posterior tip, but we want to have a little bit of like a little kyphosis in the spine, a little rounding through like the thoracic spine. Like we don't want to be super round. We also don't want to be like super rigid this way where it's like we're straight up and down. We need a little bit of that blend, right? Like it's a happy medium. After you get through those, I like to go right into just a protraction exercise, like straight protraction. So what I'll do with that, I will go ahead and work on spreading the shoulder blades, right? No bending the arms here. Just squeeze the shoulder blades back to guide the arm, and then just spread it as much as I can. I'm really, really trying to squeeze as hard as I can in here. Squeezing that area. Sometimes it's helpful to do internal rotation too. If you're not feeling your like deep in your armpit there, go ahead and do some internal rotation to pull across, and then working through, spread in the shoulder blades, nice and steady. And we're trying to feel those rib muscles, that serratus muscle. Serratus is going to attach from this border here, and then it wraps across the ribs 1 through 8, sometimes 9. So that definitely. So shoulder blade valley is going to be serratus. That's all serratus, because you want to think about like trying to be wide through there, and as you go into your push-up position, you're still maintaining tension here, right? And that's going to keep you from kind of collapsing into that valley, and there's a lot of serratus involved with that. I would say for you, and we talked about this before with like the serratus, when it's not active, like we're not stabilizing the shoulder blade onto the rib cage, and that's your prime place of stability. So like if you're not, then what is doing that? Other things are going to pick up and try to hold tighter onto the spine or onto the neck area. Different things are going to pick up tension because it's got to go somewhere. Like you have to have that tension go somewhere. Somewhere is going to want to dominate, and then we have to kind of retrain it. I think the soft tissue stuff is really helpful, and then the specific exercises. So wide arm position. So what I would think about is maybe going with like a push-up plus. So you go in neutral position, but go with like this first and work on maybe a scap push-up. Spread the shoulder blades. You can take that all the way into the full push-up and then spread the shoulder blades and really emphasize that squeeze in your serratus at the top. And you can work on doing like scap push-ups. You do 15 here, just working on squeeze and spread. And then again, it's the same kind of concept that we were working with the band just a second ago, where I'm trying to really work that serratus, get those shoulder blades to spread, and utilize the tension there. And think about like when you're going into retraction or when the arm's coming back, you still want to stabilize the joint from the opposite side, right? So it's like if you're doing a bicep curl and you're squeezing up, like you'll feel a little stretch back here. You're trying to maintain control through that, and as you're coming back down, like you're going to try to maintain control through the bicep too, right? Like you're not just going to let it drop down and have this contract back here. You're trying to maintain control on both sides of the joint with that neuromuscular control, the mental mind to muscle control, and that's going to help you stabilize the joint. Same thing with the shoulder blade. Like as you're coming back here, serratus is going to be getting stretched, right? But I'm going to still try to maintain tension here. Where like if you're going into a squat, like you're not just going into that and just letting gravity pull you. You're going to use your hip flexors and try to pull into that position. So just always, whenever you're moving, you want to make sure that you can control whatever range of motion is available. You want to try to hold on to tension on both sides of the joint to make sure that you're in a better position, a more stable position. I hope that answers your question. Let's see. And then what I would do with that, after we go through and get the serratus firing for the retracted position, a lot of times I'll go into like a bit of an incline press. You can do this on a bench for sure. I like to do it with a band or a landmine. A landmine's a great way to do it if you have access to one of those. For the sake of this, since most people don't have access to that right now, I'll go with like an incline press with the band. I'm going to just drive up and out. Again, trying to get that serratus to squeeze. And then I'm going to guide that back with a little retraction in the shoulder blade so I can control this on both sides of the joint. So reaching up, guide that back with the squeeze of the shoulder blade. And then I'm working through here and trying to stabilize both sides. And see if I can get that to integrate as like a solid movement pattern where I can control rhomboids in the back, squeezing on the way back, control the serratus on the way forward. And then for our protracted folks, people that have their shoulder blades, they're already around. They're already rounded through. A lot of times this is going to come from like our seated posture, where you're having a seat here, you're working on your desk, and then you're hunched over, and your shoulder blades automatically are going to go forward, right? So you're not using the middle of your back as much. You're not as engaged through there. Maybe the connection to that area is really weak, and you can't mentally feel that stuff. What we want to do is, first of all, work on some thoracic extension on the foam roller. I like to get that loosened up. So I'll go back through this. We'll get this tip here on the foam roller, open it up, maybe open the elbows for this one so you can kind of open the chest up as you do that. And then a good chest stretch is really good for that area too, because we think about this tissue is all shortened out. So stepping into a doorway is good, or you could go with one arm at a time on a wall, open that up, get a nice stretch through the chest. maybe 30 seconds to a minute, depending on how tight you are in there. And then a lot of times it's going to be the upper trap again. So we can kind of get this upper trap to relax. You can throw the towel on there and then work your lateral flexion. Get that all to open up. That's going to help you get that tissue to relax. And now we have a little bit more access to it. And then I like to use like some T's, some Y's, some W's to help engage through the middle of the back. So we went through the Y's earlier. I go through a couple here. So we're lifting up, trying to pull the opposite direction of that tip. We go through some W's, pulling out this direction. Big squeeze in the middle of the back. And then for our T's, we're just going to have our arms fully extended and then squeezing through here. And working through about 10 to 12 of each exercise, 10 to 12 Y's, T's, and W's. It's going to help us engage so we're a little bit more opened up. We're a little taller through there. And it's going to help us just get our spine longer, get those muscles engaged. Definitely like to hit some external rotation for that too. Just going to get the shoulder blade muscle. That helps pull the arm out to the side and rotate out to the side engaged. If you're a little bit more advanced, you might go 90-90. Get that external rotation from here. Definitely want to get that all pulling back the opposite direction. And then I will go right into like a direct retraction exercise. So it's just straight pulling the shoulder blades back. I bent my arms there, but actually I'm going to try to keep the arms nice and straight here, kind of like the protraction exercise. I think about from here, and then we're going to retract, squeezing straight back. Big squeeze in the middle of the back. Go for like 15 or so. 15 to 20 is a great number to kind of help us warm up a muscle and get some more sensory there. And then after that, I'll go through full range on a row. So just go ahead and try to get that retraction and that squeeze back and work through a nice pull here and try to integrate all that stuff in with those other muscles that we just were warming up. And that's the way I kind of like to address it. If you notice that you have one side versus the other, it's totally common, you know, to have somebody who's got right shoulders elevated, left shoulders down. A lot of times I'll think about what's going on in the core here too, right? Like if you got this lean going on, you might have something happening here, but you're also going to have this side is going to be more engaged on that trap. And it can totally happen on either side. You know, if you are right-handed and you work in a machine shop and you're always doing something up here in the right corner of the office or in your workspace, then you end up with that side more elevated, and you have to do things to help balance that out. So if you think you have something going on, it's definitely great to do an assessment. It's really good to work on some of those soft tissue things, and then it's also like taking that back to your machine shop or taking it to, you know, the garage, whatever you're doing, wherever your environment is. If you're at a desk, you know, and you're around it here, like taking that back to sitting up more and trying to be more engaged and mentally aware of the position that you're spending the most time in. That's what's going to help affect you long term.